In the whole of Chicago, you'd have been hard-pressed to find anyone more forgettable than Lila. She was the type of person who could slip past you on the sidewalk without registering, a background character in her own life. Like one more crumpled maple leaf skittering across a Michigan Avenue curb in October, destined to be trampled by commuters too busy to notice. There was nothing particularly striking about her, not pretty, not plain, not overweight, not slim. Her hair, always pulled into a low, slowly unraveling ponytail, hovered somewhere between dark brown and black, but lacked the sheen of intentional color. It framed a face that defied adjectives, not angular, not soft. Her skin was pale, but not alabaster. Her eyes rarely met anyone else's, and when they did, they glanced off like light on fogged glass. She made an effort to look presentable, but it usually translated to a thrifted blouse, a pair of cheap slacks that didn't quite fit, and scuffed ballet flats from a clearance rack at Kohl's. Her brown wool coat, unfashionable and too big, looked like it belonged to an older version of herself. She hadn't worn it to make a statement. It was just what she had. Her voice, gentle and low, was so rarely heard that even when she spoke with conviction, no one seemed to notice. As the saying goes, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and in Lila's world, that applied doubly if you were a quiet woman. She didn't push. She didn't complain. And so the world, finding her easy to ignore, did just that. Her sharp intellect, dry wit, and deeply kind heart were only revealed to the rare few who made the effort, and those were few indeed. Her life was as unremarkable as she seemed. She worked in the medical records department at St. Francis Medical Center, a small but busy hospital in the suburbs. She was dependable, fast, precise, the kind of employee who quietly kept the whole machine running. And for that reason, her supervisors kept her firmly in place. "We can't afford to lose her," they'd say, whenever talk of a promotion or transfer came up. To the world, Lila seemed bland and lifeless. But in her dreams, she became someone else entirely. There, she stood tall, graceful, radiant. She moved through the world with ease and confidence. There, men noticed her. Wanted her? But the only man who mattered was one whose face she recognized, though she had never seen it in real life. He wasn't a blur. He was detailed, vivid. His voice was warm and rich, the kind that made your name sound like poetry. His laugh was deep and familiar, like it had always belonged beside hers. In her dreams, they'd walk hand in hand down sun-drenched boardwalks in Santa Cruz, or curl up on a couch by the fire in a mountain cabin in Colorado, talking about places she'd never been, but somehow knew intimately. His name was Jeremy. She had the first dream the week she turned 18, the same year her older brother passed away. Her parents had already died 6 years earlier, and at first, she chalked it up to wishful thinking, maybe a subconscious echo of all the Hallmark Channel movies she used to binge when she couldn't sleep. But then Jeremy returned. A week later, again. And again. Soon it was nightly. It had been 16 years now. Jeremy had never left her dreams. Over time, he'd become as real to her as anyone else. He had preferences, quirks, anxieties. He could be playful, even jealous. He was charming in a way that disarmed her every time, and she fell for him, completely. No one in real life ever quite measured up, not even close. In her dreams, she was his match. His equal. Awake, though, she was certain he'd never give her a second look. At least, even if she didn't turn heads or fit anyone's definition of striking, Lila knew she was excellent at her job. That much, she never doubted. For 4 years, she'd worked in the records and documentation department at St. Francis Medical Center just outside Milwaukee. She'd been hired straight out of college, and in all that time, she'd quietly become the department's backbone. Still, she'd been passed over for 2 promotions, each time with barely an explanation. And both of her requests for transfers? Flatly denied. She'd seen one supervisor get reassigned to another floor, so she wasn't surprised when, one Monday morning, the latest one walked in with his replacement. "This is Dasher Young," the outgoing supervisor announced to the open office, raising his voice over the low hum of keyboards and printers. "He's not new to the hospital, he's just been moved over from HR to take over supervision of this unit. I'll be heading over to accounting. I've already told him you all are a solid, efficient team, always meeting deadlines and exceeding performance metrics." As he continued his half-hearted speech, Dasher's gaze swept across the room, pausing slightly, too long, on every woman he saw. The data entry team was predominantly female. And then his eyes landed on Lila. She sat facing their direction, but her eyes were fixed on the worn-out office carpet. Something about her caught his attention. She didn't even try to make eye contact. That's when he smiled, a slow, calculating, predator smile. Lila felt the moment his attention hit her like a chill down her back. She lifted her eyes slightly, confused. Why me? There was something off about the way he looked at her. This wasn't curiosity, it was something else. Something colder. Now they were walking toward her desk. "This is Lila Mabry," the outgoing supervisor was saying in a hushed voice, not realizing, or not caring, that she could hear every word. "She's the reason we hit our metrics. Don't lose her if you want your bonuses." Then, louder, "Mr. Young, this is Lila Mabry. She's been with us the longest and knows this unit like the back of her hand." Lila stood to greet him, eyes on his ugly green paisley tie. She shook his hand briefly, catching the glint in his eye out of the corner of hers, and feeling the way he held her hand just a beat too long. "I hope we can be friends," Dasher said with a smirk. She pulled her hand back instinctively. The contact made her skin crawl. This man is too much, she thought, forcing a neutral smile. "Yes, sir. We work as a team here. Welcome aboard." "I think it's better to be friends than just teammates," he replied smoothly, finally letting go of her hand. The way she recoiled excited him. He liked them shy. Isolated. Unassuming. That kind was always the easiest to manipulate. First, resist. Then a little flattery, a little pressure. Eventually, compliance. A late night in the office here, a ride home there. And if she pushed back? A warning. A threat. Maybe a transfer. It always worked. And there was never any proof. He was too good for that. Lila, to him, looked like the perfect target. Lonely. Overlooked. Her faded blouse looked like something from a thrift store bin. Who let her leave the house like that? He gave her the smile a cat gives a mouse, then moved on down the line of introductions. Lately, Lila had been working late, again. Ever since Dasher, he insisted on being called that, to keep things friendly, had taken over a month ago, her workload had inexplicably doubled. And no matter how hard she tried, nothing was ever right, he was impossible to satisfy. Worse than that, he nitpicked every line of her reports, questioning her word choices, then demanding she use his language, only to turn around and criticize her for doing exactly that. The back and forth would escalate until he raised his voice, humiliating her in front of others. So she'd stopped offering any opinions at all. What made it worse was the way he always waited until 4:55 p.m. to summon her to review a few things. Today was no different. "You sent for me, sir?" she asked quietly, stepping into his office. "Yeah." "Shut the door." She hesitated, then did as he asked. Two other staffers, Eric and George, were still around. If she kept the meeting short, she might leave with them and avoid being alone with Dasher. Again. "I was hoping to catch a ride with Eric," she said quickly. "It's getting late." "Let them go. I'll drop you home." "No need, thank you. Actually, could we go over this tomorrow morning? It's nearly closing." He narrowed his eyes. "I don't know, Lila. Are you a team player or not?" She stared at him blankly. "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about," he added. "You're not acting like a team player." She didn't respond. She scanned the shelves, the clock, anywhere but his face. It irritated him. She hadn't responded to any of his advances. Hadn't blushed, hadn't flirted back, hadn't even acknowledged the game he thought they were playing. She acted like he didn't even exist. And that made him want to win more. He stood and moved to the window, peeking through the blinds to check the floor. Empty? He turned and walked toward her, invading her space like it was his right. "I told you, I'd rather be friends than just coworkers. That's still on the table. I can make it worth your while." He was too close. She could smell his breath, coffee, cigarettes, and something sour. "Oh, sure, sir," she said, stepping back toward the door. "We're all friends in this department. Good night." She barely made it 2 steps before he grabbed her arm and yanked her around. "I can be a good friend," he hissed. "But I can make things hard for you if you keep turning me down." A small frown creased her forehead. "Come on," he said with a smirk. "What am I really asking for?" "I don't know," she said flatly. "What are you asking for?" "You're not a kid, Lila. You know exactly what I want. And I bet you'd like it too." Then, she looked up. Directly into his face. Into his eyes. And something shifted. He hadn't expected that. Her eyes were dark, almost black. And right now, they were burning. "Don't you ever bring this up again," she said, voice low but unmistakably firm. "Ever?" She turned on her heel and walked toward the door. He let out a dry laugh behind her, watching her retreat. He wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. She would break eventually. They always did. A few days later, Lila was more engrossed in her work than usual. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she became aware of a strange silence. Looking up, she realized it was lunchtime. As usual, the rest of the staff had gone out to lunch together, without her, leaving her alone in the open plan office. Determined to avoid any interaction with Dasher unless other staff were present, she stood quickly to leave. In her haste, she accidentally knocked over a bottle of water. It hit the floor and rolled to the far side of her cubicle, spilling its contents and quickly forming a puddle that began to spread toward the next desk. As she leaned over her chair, reaching awkwardly for the bottle, she felt a hand grab her bottom. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The shock froze her in place. Her breath caught in her throat as rage surged through her. She stood there, bottle in hand, hair tousled, cheeks flushed, lips parted in disbelief, but the words wouldn't come. She watched him walk casually out of the unit, as though nothing had happened. Snapping out of her paralysis, Lila marched straight to the top floor of the hospital, where Human Resources was located. It was still lunchtime, and the only staff member on duty told her she would have to wait another 20 minutes. But Lila couldn't sit still. Anger pulsed through her like a drumbeat. She stormed back to her desk and began drafting a written complaint. The sound of her furious typing echoed through the empty office. When her colleagues returned, one of them scolded her for being careless. She ignored the comment, too full of fury to speak. Only when she finally hit send did she feel the slightest hint of relief. It was short-lived. 4 months later, on a Friday afternoon, Lila stood before a disciplinary committee. She was the one being investigated, accused of harassing Mr. Dasher Young. "Thank you for being here, Miss Mabry," the committee chair began. "You understand why you've been summoned, don't you?" She nodded. "Please speak up, Miss Mabry. We need your voice for the recording." "Yes," she said quietly. "I understand, though I was surprised to receive the invitation." "Well," the chair continued, "you've made several complaints of sexual harassment against Mr. Young over the past few months, am I right?" "Yes." "But you were warned not to continue making allegations without evidence. Yet, you persisted." "I did, because he kept doing it. But I'm shocked he had the audacity to report me." The chair nodded, expression unreadable. "Yes, well, Mr. Young has filed a counter-complaint, and frankly, the volume of your accusations is concerning. 7 complaints. That's an environment of hostility. You've created a toxic workplace." An hour later, Lila was standing by the water dispenser, gulping her 4th cup of water. The tears she refused to cry in the committee room now threatened to break loose. She had stayed behind after closing, trying to calm her nerves. She took out her phone and dialed Teo, one of the few people who truly knew her. More than a friendly voice, she needed someone who would fight for her. Teo would. Loudly. Fiercely. Always. Teo, the Nigerian landlady who had become a best friend, had seen through Lila's quiet shell the day she moved into her apartment complex. Boisterous and motherly, she had barged her way into Lila's life, and stayed. Despite their differences, they were soul-deep friends. The phone rang. "Hello, Lila love," came Teo's cheerful voice. "Hi, Madam T, Lila answered, keeping her voice light. She rounded the corner of the office area, and stopped dead. Dasher was there. He leaned casually against the flimsy partition of her cubicle, smug and triumphant. Lila's heart dropped. "Sorry," Teo said. "Someone's at my door. I think it's my package. I'll call you back." The line went dead. "Are you on the phone?" Dasher said in a syrupy tone. Lila said nothing, setting her phone down and starting to pack her belongings. With her suspension starting the next day, she needed to take more than usual, but she had no box. She awkwardly tried to squeeze her plant, 2 notebooks, and various personal items into her bag. "Don't forget to leave your drawer keys," Dasher said. "And don't take anything official." "I'm not taking anything that doesn't belong to me," she replied curtly. "Well," he said, smiling sleazily, "you can still come back and say hi. We're family here, remember? And my offer still stands. We could go to a hotel if you're shy." Lila gave him a blank stare and kept packing. "Oh come on," he pushed. "We're adults. You're not married, and I doubt you have a boyfriend? I can satisfy you. I'll make you feel things you've never felt before." Still, she didn't respond. "Don't ignore me." His tone darkened. "I'm talking to you." He grabbed her arm, throwing her off balance. She steadied herself, still silent. "You know there are no cameras in here. I could do anything I want, and no one would know. You're already suspended. Who would believe you now?" Lila crammed the last of her things into her bag. Better to leave something behind than spend another second in that office with him. She hoisted her bag onto her shoulder and picked up her phone. She turned toward the door, but he grabbed her again, pulling her against him. She screamed, twisting and shoving. "Let go of me, you creep. Don't touch me, you bastard." He laughed, blocking her attempted slap with casual cruelty. "In this office, I'm king. All I asked for was a kiss now and then. But since you want to be difficult, then leave. And don't come back. I've played this game a long time. Don't mess with me." Tears burned in her eyes, tears of fury, not fear. She didn't respond. She just turned and left. In the elevator, she looked back twice, afraid he might follow. But he just stood there, watching her leave, his smile twisted and inhuman. Outside her apartment building, she saw Teo. She was seeing off a workman, but her attention was already on Lila, on her heavy bag, and her face. Teo's eyes widened with alarm at the sight of Lila's trembling shoulders and teary eyes. Lila had held it together all the way home, focusing on strangers to stay grounded. But now, seeing that familiar, maternal face, she finally broke. She fell into Teo's arms, sobbing in the open street, no longer caring who saw. All she knew was the weight of injustice, and the comfort of being held by someone who would believe her. "Oh no, my dear, come inside. Don't let your enemies see you cry," Teo said, opening her arms. 45 minutes, several cups of tea, and a barrage of animated recriminations later, Lila made her way back to her apartment. She was now armed with the phone number of a lawyer Teo swore would handle that wicked man on her behalf. "By the time we are done with him, if he sees a woman coming one way, he will run the other. He'll shiver when he hears woo, not to talk of man," she declared with as fierce a face as her jolly nature could manage. Despite everything, Lila found herself smiling, not at her situation, but at her friend. She trusted Teo. You didn't achieve all Teo had without surrounding yourself with competent people. That evening, Lila sent a message to the number to schedule an appointment with Jeremy Wright, and by noon the following day, she was at his office. It was a Saturday, and the office was quiet, efficient and sparsely furnished. The front door was open, but no one seemed to be around. "Hello?" she called. "Yes, hi. Back here," a pleasant voice answered. She turned toward the open door and saw him striding out to meet her. And then she froze. Her breath caught. She hadn't thought anything of the name when she booked the appointment. Jeremy was a fairly common name, but now, standing before him, she realized this Jeremy was literally the man from her dreams. Tall, broad-shouldered, long-limbed, and impossibly regal. His skin was smooth, like melted chocolate, with a hint of gray at his temples. Casual in his weekend wear, He still looked like he belonged on a magazine cover. She swallowed and reminded herself to breathe. And then she became hyper-aware of herself. She hadn't even looked in the mirror before leaving. Her face was bare of makeup, her cream lace blouse tucked into her faithful brown skirt, and her battered 1-inch heels that she'd promised herself she would retire, months ago. She thought of her panty lines, the ill-fitting underwear, and the short blouse. She had brought only a small purse. She cringed inwardly. Shabby, she thought. Her cheeks flushed. Jeremy, oblivious to the cause of her discomfort, assumed her distress stemmed from her suspension. He offered her a box of tissues and gestured for her to sit. "Tell me what happened," he said gently. The story came out in halting pieces at first. It was hard to tell someone like him such a humiliating story, especially when she didn't feel like the kind of woman men obsessed over. Would he believe her? But his calm, kind presence encouraged her, and soon she was speaking more freely. He leaned forward, nodded at the right places, and gave her his full attention. It was disarming. When she finished, she said self-consciously, "I'm sure I'm not the kind of woman who comes in here with these kinds of stories, am I?" Jeremy smiled kindly. "You'd be surprised. Men like Dasher young prey on women they perceive as vulnerable. It's not about attraction, it's about power. They want the thrill of control." That eased something in her, but not entirely. She still thought of her clothes, her face, her general state of being, how far she felt from any kind of control. "So, where do we go from here?" she asked. "Well," he said, scanning his notes, "honestly. There's no evidence. He's smart. He's done this before, I'm sure, but the lack of other complaints likely means the others gave in to him, or were too afraid to speak up. Unless we can find someone else who's been through this and is willing to talk, we have no real case." "Yes. He's very charming," she said bitterly. "In a Cheshire cat kind of way." Jeremy laughed. She liked the sound of it. It was the laugh from her dreams. "But seriously," he continued, "without more, we can't prove a pattern. And since he made a formal complaint against you, it tilts perception in his favor." She sat back, frustrated. "So I'm just supposed to serve my suspension like a good girl and then go back to being abused?" He shook his head. "If you want my honest advice, I think you should resign. People like him escalate when they're frustrated. He's a coward, but he's calculating." She sat silently, then spoke softly. "So I need a new job. With no references. What am I supposed to do now?" "I'm really sorry, Lila," he said. And she could tell he meant it. "You seem like a good person. It's not fair, but sometimes bad things happen to good people." She stood. "Thanks for your advice. I'll take it. There's no use trying to prove how strong I am by staying in a toxic place. He'll get what's coming to him, eventually." He walked her to the door. She was grateful he didn't linger to watch her walk away. She was almost certain her panty lines were mocking her stride. She stopped by Teo's flat to tell her about the meeting, then wandered up to her own apartment, feeling the weight of disappointment settle in her bones. She sat for a long time thinking, of Jeremy, of herself, and liked none of the conclusions she came to. Eventually, her stomach reminded her she'd only eaten a single slice of bread all day. As she passed her closet on the way to the kitchen, she paused. She opened it and stared at the rows of shabby, clean clothes. Something someone had once said floated back to her, "If you don't have them, you won't wear them." She had nodded at the wisdom back then, but today, she acted on it. In a sudden fit of frustrated self-loathing, she pulled everything off the hangers and tossed them into a heap by the door. Old hangers, tattered bags, worn shoes, all of it went into the sad brown felt bag that served as her travel case. She dragged it outside and dumped it by the roadside bin. When she returned, she remembered again that she was hungry. Too exhausted to cook, she grabbed another slice of bread and went to bed. She dreamed of Jeremy again, but her dreams were restless. She woke several times, her face damp with tears. On Sunday, she stayed in bed, overwhelmed by depression and uncertainty. She tried to make plans, but her mind wouldn't cooperate. Then came Monday morning. She awoke before dawn and couldn't fall back asleep. But something had shifted. The depression had lifted, replaced by a quiet resolve. Whatever Dasher had seen in her that marked her as a victim, she would root it out. She would reclaim herself. She lay in bed thinking. Then she got up to pee. Sitting on the toilet, she looked down at her underwear. She pulled it off and tossed it in the trash. She went to her underwear basket and picked out one bra and one pair of panties. The rest? Into the bin. She climbed back into bed, waiting for the sun to rise. Today would be the first day of the rest of her life. She spent the day shopping. It wasn't easy, the price of clothes stunned her, but she managed to get a few new t-shirts and 2 pairs of jeans. The salesgirls talked her out of the oversized pair she had gravitated toward and into ones that fit her figure. Feeling hopeful, she walked into a salon. "I want a makeover," she said. And just like that, she began to rewrite her story. 2 weeks later she was sitting on Teo's soft sofa drinking a cup of hot fruit juice and discussing her various shopping experiences. "Honestly, I can't get over the way you look now. It's so different," Teo was saying. "When you came home the other night with your hair colored, I almost didn't recognize you." The doorbell rang. "That must be the electrician," Teo said. "There is always something wrong with this old building. The new tenant in number 4 is complaining about one of her light fixtures. Will you be okay to sit for maybe 20 minutes? "It's fine, I'll spend the time looking online for new job listings." She did take out her phone as Teo left. But she was immediately distracted by the camera icon on the screen. It was not an app that she used frequently, and especially not to take selfies, but with the compliment she had just received, she was tempted. She pulled up the app and took a selfie. Then she pursed her lips, stuck out her tongue, made a funny face. A few fun minutes later, she put the app away and wondered what other apps she could explore, all thought of job finding gone for the moment from her mind. She opened her music player and began to browse through the few songs and surprisingly many voice recordings when she heard something that made her face flush and her heart beat wildly. She was almost hysterical when Teo returned. "Do you think he'll believe it?" Lila asked for the 5th time, her voice quivering with excitement and disbelief. "He's a lawyer, babe, not a fool. That's cold, hard proof. With that kind of recording, even Dasher's smarmy charm won't save him," Teo said firmly, her eyes glittering with righteous fire. Lila nodded, biting her lip. "I can't believe I have actual evidence. All this time, I thought it was just my word against his." "It was. Until now. But girl, now you have your word and his. In stereo." They both laughed, the sound bubbling up like relief after a long-held breath. Exactly 53 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Lila's breath caught the moment he stepped inside. He looked relaxed and confident in a wine-colored fitted t-shirt that hugged his arms and brought out the deep undertones in his skin. A glint of gold peeked from beneath his collar, and he looked every bit like the version of Jeremy that had haunted her thoughts, and her dreams. But he didn't recognize her. She watched, a little stunned, as his eyes passed over her with polite disinterest. Then Teo gestured towards her. "This is Lila." His eyes widened in slow, dawning recognition. "Oh, hi. Wow. Nice to meet you. Again," he said, offering his hand with a sheepish smile. Lila took it, her own face warming. She was used to being overlooked, not stared at, not like this. His gaze was direct but gentle, curious even. It wasn't the cold calculation she'd seen in Dasher Young's eyes, but something else. Something that made her feel seen? But then he shook himself, his eyes scanning her face with professional concern. "What happened?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, she handed him her phone. "Please listen to this," she said quietly. He took the phone, tapped the play button, and listened. As the recording played, his expression shifted, from mild confusion to dawning realization, and then to something hard, almost dangerous. When it ended, he looked up slowly. "You didn't tell me you had this." "I didn't know I had it," Lila said, still a little stunned herself. "I was just going through my files. It was a total accident." Jeremy was silent for a moment. Then he walked over to the small table and placed the phone down gently, almost reverently. "This changes everything," he said. Lila exhaled shakily. "So I can fight back now." Jeremy turned to her, and for the first time since they'd met, his demeanor lost its professional distance. There was steel in his gaze. "Not only can you fight back, Lila. You can win. Teo clapped her hands together, then quickly covered her mouth. Sorry, but yes. This is exactly what we needed. Jeremy nodded. We'll get this transcribed and backed up right away. I'll have my assistant contact HR at your former office and request a formal review of your suspension. We'll present this to them, and if they still try to sweep it under the rug. He shrugged. Then we'll take it to court. Lila sat down slowly, overwhelmed. Is it really possible? I mean, to get justice? Jeremy leaned on the edge of the table, looking directly at her. It's more than possible. It's overdue. She felt her throat tighten, but this time it wasn't from fear or humiliation, it was something close to hope. To safety. Maybe even power. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. You just did, he said with a soft smile. You trusted me. That's enough. Teo reached for the forgotten juice and raised her glass like a toast. To justice. And to never wearing ugly underwear again. They all laughed, even Jeremy, though he clearly didn't understand the full story behind that one. Lila leaned back, watching them, and for the first time in what felt like years, she felt like herself again. But this time, a newer, stronger version. Throughout their conversation, that look lingered in his eyes. He was focused on the case, on strategy and details, but every time she glanced up, he was watching her the way her dream Jeremy used to, as though she mattered. As though she wasn't invisible anymore. They finished their discussion, sent the recording to his email, and agreed she would visit his office the following week. He'd prepare the legal documents and their contract by then. As they walked him out, the setting sun bathed the building in a soft amber glow. Lila barely noticed Teo's sly retreat. Oh no, I left the kettle boiling, Teo said dramatically. You two say your goodbyes, I'll be back in a bit. She practically sprinted up the steps, leaving Lila blinking after her. Jeremy turned to Lila, his pulse quickening. So, Tuesday at 1? She nodded. Yes. 1 o'clock is fine. But isn't that your lunch break? It is, he said, then added with a slight smile, but I was hoping we could make it a lunch meeting. A lunch meeting sounds fine, Lila replied, trying to sound composed even as her stomach did cartwheels. He reached for a handshake, but this time lingered for a beat longer. You look really nice today, he said, his voice low. You changed your hair, I almost didn't recognize you. She looked down, embarrassed. I just went to the salon. There was something about her face, contrasted as it was against her hair and white blouse and the backdrop of the dimming daylight. She looked ethereal, like an Arion, like she would be blown away by any gust of wind. It made him want to hold on to her, to keep her with him. It made him want to kiss her right there and then, and he clenched his jaw and fists, swallowing hard to stop himself from moving towards her. He could not risk saying any more. So he left. But as he drove away, the feeling that tugged at him wouldn't let go. She felt so familiar. And then it hit him. The dream. The girl in white, the sunlight, the conversation that felt endless. It was her. And the realization filled him with quiet awe. Several weeks later, after a series of tense meetings and finely crafted letters, Jeremy managed to negotiate a settlement. Lila received everything she'd asked for, and more. Her severance pay was recalculated to match the seniority she had long deserved. A generous lump sum was transferred to her account, and the hospital issued a glowing letter of recommendation. Dasher Young was fired. But Lila didn't stop there. With Jeremy by her side, she pursued criminal charges. The evidence was damning, the trial swift. Dasher crumbled in real time, shrinking before everyone's eyes. By the end of it, he was a husk of the arrogant man who once loomed over her in the office. His wife had left, his children taken. No friends stood beside him in court. He had tried to silence Lila, but in the end, it was his voice, preserved in that accidental recording, that condemned him. Lila wasn't there for the final hearing. She had moved on. She was in the car with Teo, heading to view a small duplex on the city's outskirts. This one has great potential, Teo was saying. If you fix up the second unit, you could rent it out and, Lila's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Jeremy. Won't you take the call? Teo asked, teasing gently. A soft smile spread across her face as she answered. Hello, His voice came through, calm and warm. Just wanted to let you know, it's over. Sentencing came through today. 3 years. Lila looked out the window, watching the world move past. I'd forgotten it was today. I figured you might. You've moved forward, Lila. That's a good thing. She didn't say anything right away. Then, softly, thank you? For everything. You did the hard part, he replied. I was just the paperwork, she laughed. You were never just anything. Teo glanced sideways at her and grinned. Tell him about the duplex, she mouthed. Lila smiled and shook her head. We'll talk soon. Soon, Jeremy said. And as she ended the call, she realized that her story, the painful, messy, brave one, wasn't ending. It was just beginning. You blush a lot these days, Teo noted, as she slowed to a stop at a traffic light. Especially when you take a certain person's calls. He's invited me to lunch on Saturday, Lila said with a little shrug. Again? At this rate, he's going to feed you into a whole new wardrobe. Lila laughed, self-conscious. It's nothing serious. Just to celebrate the case wins. Nothing fancy. When a man like Jeremy says nothing fancy, but keeps inviting you out, he's thinking more than just casual. What do you mean? We're professional. And anyway, I'm not even sure I'm his type. First, never sell yourself short, Teo said firmly. You are beautiful. Kind? Smart? Brave. You didn't run from that man, you fought. You won. Most people would have stayed silent. I almost did. But once you saw your worth, you went to war and conquered. I came, I saw, I conquered, Lila said with a small smile. Guess I am brave. Brave and evolving. You're finally putting that big brain to use for yourself. No more backroom drone work. Lila went quiet, touched. You said first. What's the second thing? Teo grinned. You didn't see his face the first time he saw you at my place. You were too busy staring at my rug. You looked innocent, edible, in that big white blouse and jeans. But he saw it and bam. Couldn't take his eyes off you. She paused, and I know his family. Good people. His mom told me he's never brought a girl home, says he's waiting for someone special. I wonder if he's finally found her. Don't get my hopes up. My dear, give the man the green light. As opposed to the red light. Just then, the traffic light turned green. Exactly. Green light means go. Teo grinned and hit the gas. They both burst out laughing. Jeremy picked her up right on time. I'm taking you somewhere new today, he said as he merged onto the freeway. Never brought anyone else there. But I think today calls for something special. They drove out of the city and into the countryside, arriving at a quiet settlement tucked behind a black gate. Jeremy handed a red card to the guard, and they were ushered in, taken by golf cart through lush gardens, over a small bridge, and toward a secluded building. Inside was a serene, barefoot-only dining room with mats on the floor, cushions for reclining, and one wall made entirely of glass, overlooking a stream and rose garden. Lunch was traditional, indulgent, and delicious. As they ate, Jeremy leaned in, smiling. Hope you didn't eat before this. I'm glad I didn't, Lila said, wide-eyed. This place is unreal. Where are we? It's a family resort. Private. We keep it quiet. They ate and talked for hours. About their cases. Their childhoods. About nothing. About everything. As the sun began to set, Jeremy suggested a walk. They crossed a bridge into the garden, moving through golden light until they came to a small clearing. A fire pit burned, soft and warm, with fruit and drinks waiting under mesh covers. They sat in the quiet. You know, Jeremy said softly, I feel like I met you before. Before your office? He nodded. I didn't recognize you then. But when I saw you again at Teo's place, I knew. Where did we meet? He smiled shyly, drawing circles with his finger in the sand. I want to ask you something first. Would you like to get to know me better? She looked at him, surprised. Yes. I would. I don't want to pursue you unless you feel something for me, too. The Bible says not to awaken love until it's time. She held her breath. May I pursue you? He asked, eyes glowing in the firelight. Yes, she said softly. You may. He moved closer, kissed her hand. She felt him shaking, just like she was. I met you on a train, he said quietly. You were wearing white. With a boy, your brother, maybe. You looked heartbroken. I smiled at you. You smiled back. Tears welled in her eyes. That was you. We were coming back from our parents' funeral. My brother and I. I had cried the whole way until I saw you. And your smile made it stop. They sat in stunned wonder. I've been dreaming about you ever since, she whispered. After my brother passed away too. Almost every night. Until I walked into your office. Jeremy stared at her, amazed. So. I'm the man of your dreams? She laughed, wiping her eyes, and playfully hit his knee. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her. The end.